Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Replay Room. Today's episode will be recapping college football week 2 and everything that came with that, as there was quite a lot that happened and that I found important from this weekend. So let's get into it. So the first matchup I want to talk about is Baylor at number 17 SMU, a very underrated game throughout coming into this weekend, but it definitely did not disappoint as it ended 48-45 in Baylor's favor in double overtime. And now when you hear that score, you're thinking an offensive shootout, and you would be 100% correct. There were over 1,000 total yards of offense between the two teams in this game, and defense was essentially optional because who actually needs to play that? SMU came out very hot in this game, led by quarterback Kevin Jennings, who went 16 for 22 for 295 yards, 3 touchdowns, but did throw 1 pick. And normally that would be good enough for you to win. Somehow Baylor hung around in that game, even with Jennings' performance, and was still down 38-24 with 5.5 minutes left to go in regulation. However, enter Baylor quarterback Sawyer Robertson. Now, Robertson played very well against Auburn last week and they didn't win, so I didn't mention him that much. But he was my player of the week this week, and he is turning into an elite quarterback. Not only did he throw for 2 touchdowns in the final 5.5 minutes of the game, he also just happened to go 34 for 50 for, just 440 yards and 4 touchdowns. Because why? Because that's an easy stat line to achieve. He was incredible, and honestly, he was really good against Auburn too. He just got overlooked because Auburn beat them. He's going to be a name that's well known around college football by the end of the year. I can tell you that much. And there was also heartbreak for SMU in this game as their kicker missed 2 crucial field goals. He missed a field goal to win it at the end of regulation, and then also missed a field goal in double overtime that allowed Baylor to escape with a 48-45 win. Baylor could be sneaky competitive in the Big 12, I believe, if they can figure out their defense. If they can't figure out their defense, they aren't going to win an offensive shootout like this every week. This was a very big win for Baylor, though, and a nice bounce back after that Week 1 loss to Auburn. And this loss drafts SMU entirely out of the AP poll, and they have some work to do if they want to get back to the playoff like they did last year, and what I think is a loaded ACC. So we'll move into a game that was in the 3:30 slot this weekend, and that was USF at Florida. And I mentioned this game at the end of last week's episode as one I was watching, and I hit the nail on the head with that, because for the second week in a row, your South Florida Bulls got a top 25 win. And the main story from this game was Florida shooting themselves in the foot. They had 11 penalties for 103 yards, and that is just sloppy football. And you are not going to win games when you have that much. And to make it worse, on the eventual game-winning drive, a Florida defensive lineman decided to spit on a player, and he got flagged and ejected for it, which allowed the Bulls to continue their drive, which ended up being an eventual 87-yard game-winning drive with a 20-yard field goal by kicker Noah Gramatica to win over Florida. Now, Bulls quarterback Byron Brown, who we talked about last week, was once again good. He was 23 of 36 for 263 yards and a touchdown with no turnovers, and he also had 66 yards on the ground. He is clearly the best quarterback in the group of 5, in my opinion, and could be a Heisman dark horse depending on how the rest of the season goes, to be honest. This was USF's first ever win over Florida, which I think is super, super cool. And this almost cements them certainly as the group of 5 front runner, because they now have 2 top 25 wins, including a win over an SEC team, which is a fantastic resume, and they still aren't even out of the preseason yet. As for Florida and Billy Napier, this is an inexcusable loss. With the brutal schedule that you have to know that this is a game you must win, because when you have to go play all of the teams that they have coming up, for instance, they have LSU coming up next week, you gotta win the ones that you're supposed to win. And USF is very intriguing for me because they do in fact go on the road again to play another top 25 team in number 5 Miami, and I think it's fair to say that if they were to beat Miami, they are essentially locked into the college football playoff no matter how the rest of their season goes. And kind of doubling back to Florida, Billy Napier's seat is once again hot. and he's going to have to do a lot, and I really don't expect him to be back at Florida after this year. Moving into another 3:30 game was the border war between Missouri and Kansas. This was the first edition of the border war in more than a decade, and it did not disappoint at all. The Jayhawks jumped out to a huge 21-6 first quarter lead, but Missouri just kept chipping away throughout the entire game. Quarterback Bo Pribula was awesome for the Tigers. He went 30 of 39 for 334 yards and 3 touchdowns, including the go-ahead score with 4:14 left in the fourth. And then running back Jamal Roberts sealed it with a 63-yard rushing touchdown in the final 2 minutes to cap off his 143-yard day. After the fast start, Missouri took complete control of the game, and honestly, in my opinion, they look like a sneaky good SEC team and could make some noise a little bit, and they should be looking at a pretty good bowl game come the end of the year. One other storyline I want to hit on from this game is the fact that a Missouri fan got selected to go down and try and kick a field goal for $25,000, and instead what he did was he lifted up his shirt, revealed something that said FKU, and then kicked the ball at the Kansas sideline, and that really just shows how true this rivalry is. So it was a great edition of the border war, though, and personally I think it should happen every year, but I don't know that that will ever be the case. Jumping into the next game, it was the only ranked matchup of the weekend and the nightcap. Number 15 Michigan at number 18 Oklahoma, and there were a lot of questions for both sides coming into this game, but I think the simple way to put this is calling it the John Mateer game. Now, I mentioned Oklahoma quarterback John Mateer is one of my standout players last week, and he did not disappoint this week either. He is now, in my opinion, a certified dog. He passed for 270 yards and a touchdown, while also leading the team in rushing yards with 74 and a touchdown on the ground. If that's not a standout performance, I don't know what is, and he honestly looks like a Heisman contender at this point, and I don't see a way where he's going to slow down because he played a very good Michigan defense. Michigan's game plan, I felt, was way too conservative while watching it. They've tried to more protect Bryce Underwood instead of letting him play, and it honestly just, they had no shot with what they came out with outside of a 75-yard Jamal Haynes touchdown run to start the second half. They really didn't get anything going. And part of that for me was their offensive line was not good at all. And that for Michigan is not normally the case. So I definitely have some concerns about the Wolverines in that sense. However, for Oklahoma, they look like they definitely belong in that upper echelon of SEC teams. I definitely think that they could be a sneaky team up in that SEC, finish higher than people expect them to, and are a potential playoff team if they keep playing as well. And John Mateer is going to be really good. And I don't think I can say more than that, because he's fantastic after watching him actually play. And then the final game I'll cover from this week was number 12 Arizona State at Mississippi State, and I also mentioned this game at the end of last week, which this is, in my opinion, another upset of the weekend, because I thought USF definitely had a shot against Florida. I did not think Mississippi State had a shot against Arizona State. I was very high on Arizona State coming into this game, and to be blunt with it, they did not look good. They looked flat out bad. The offense just didn't gel at all, and Sam Leavitt did not look like himself throughout the entire game. I think he finished with like 82 yards, a touchdown, and 2 picks, which for him is awful. Now, on the other side of the coin, Mississippi State quarterback Blake Shapen, who I don't know how many years he's been in college now, went 19 of 33 for 279 yards and 3 touchdowns. But the crucial play of the game was when he found a wide open Brennan Thompson for a 58-yard touchdown with 30 seconds left to seal it. And that was really fun to watch, because Mississippi State fans went crazy, and their program's been through so much in the past couple of years that I was very happy to see them get a top win like this. As for Arizona State, this is a huge blow to anything you were hoping to build this year. They just didn't look good. They have a lot to work on now, and also I don't think that they can beat some of those top teams in the Big 12, because I think they'll get outplayed if they have to play Iowa State, Utah, Texas Tech. All look very good, and I don't know that they can compete with that if they perform like they did against Mississippi State. As for Mississippi State, this was a very nice win for them, and I'm really intrigued to see how they do throughout the rest of the year. They might make a bowl game, but I don't know what their SEC schedule looks like. I just know the SEC is very good, and they don't have as much talent as the SEC does, so it'll be interesting. And then, so now I'm going to my quick hitters and standout players. So a couple quick things I wanted to talk about, but not do full recaps of. Clemson struggled against Troy. I don't really know why. They were down 16-0 at one point. They ended up winning 27-16, but I have a lot of questions for Dabo Swinney and the Tigers after that, because getting down by that much to Troy is not a good thing. Having that type of performance after a week 1 loss to LSU does not sit right with me, so the Tigers have a lot to prove to me in my eyes. And then the other one was Oregon taking Mike Gundy's comments about how much they spend at NIL Michael Jordan levels of personally, because Dan Lanning made sure they put a 69-3 beatdown on the Cowboys on national television, and he kind of just never took his foot off the gas, which I don't blame him, but I hope Mike Gundy learned his lesson about calling out top teams, even though I really don't think he's going to be at Oklahoma State after this year either. And I'll kind of jump into some notable player performances now. Texas A&M edge rusher Cassius Howell had 3 consecutive sacks in the same drive, which is almost unheard of and absolutely ridiculous. So huge shout out to him. Florida State wide receiver Deuce Robinson had 5 catches for 173 yards and 2 touchdowns in their win, and really that was his breakout game, so I'm intrigued to see if he can keep up those numbers or near those numbers throughout the rest of the year. Wake Forest running back DeMond Claiborne had 193 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns in their game against an FCS opponent, which granted isn't impressive, but still to have 193 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns, you had to be doing something right, so he deserves a shout out. And then South Carolina punt returner / wide receiver Vicari Swain had 2 punt returns for 107 yards and 2 touchdowns, which brings him to 3 punt return touchdowns in 2 games. And honestly, he's just going to win Returner of the Year. I don't really care what else happens throughout the rest of the year, because that's his award now, because you're not going to find somebody else that's going to get that many in a season, let alone 2 games. We could be looking at a generational type return season if he keeps these numbers up. So looking ahead into some stuff I think I'm going to cover next week is South Florida is now ranked 18th, and they go into a matchup that is now a ranked matchup at number 5 Miami. Can the Bulls pull off their 3rd straight top 25? Oh my gosh. Can the Bulls pull off their 3rd straight top 25 upset? I don't know. I'm very, very interested as to how that'll go. And Miami's very, very good, so I'm not expecting it, but it would be really cool. And I think you would have a hard time keeping USF out of the top 10 if they won that game somehow. There are 2 SEC powerhouse matchups next week, LSU versus Florida. LSU's looked very good this year so far. Florida really needs a bounce back win, so that'll be a good game, as it always is. And then Georgia goes into Tennessee for another massive SEC showdown. And this might be a bold take, but I don't think that Georgia comes out of there with a win. I think Tennessee gets the win down in Neyland Stadium, and it's too much for the Dogs. Another game that I'm watching is Notre Dame versus Texas A&M, as that will have huge playoff implications as the Fighting Irish look for their first win of the year, and A&M looks for a resume-boosting win. And then 2 other smaller games that I have my eye on are Wisconsin versus Alabama, and I want to see if the Badgers can test Bama in Madison in Bama's first game against a real team since they've lost to Florida State. And then the other one I want to look at is Georgia Tech versus Clemson, because after this week I think Georgia Tech has a shot if their quarterback Haynes King plays, and I really do think the Tigers could be upset by the Yellow Jackets next week. Anyways, that's all I have for my week 2 recap. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and let me know your thoughts down below. As always, thanks for watching.